Coincidences can be seriously strange. When mysterious events are added to that, they can turn from strange to just downright eerie. Number 10. Oscar Awards or Academy Awards are the pinnacle of the film industry. They refer to a cinematic achievement that actors and actresses are awarded on a yearly basis. The concept and the ceremony itself may seem like a very mundane event, but it doesn't come without consequence or coincidence. These achievements have brought about the Oscars love curse, a term coined at least a decade ago, focusing mainly on actresses, although some actors have also been the victims of it. The curse refers to a strange and coincidental phenomenon. The theory is that when an actress wins the Golden Statuette, marking their triumphs in the film industry, they're more likely to see the end of their romantic relationship, either through divorce or a breakup. And a few studies have been carried out on this mysterious correlation. Researchers from Toronto University and Carnegie Mellon University embarked on an analysis where they looked at the cases of 751 film industry performers who'd been nominated for awards in the categories of Best Actor and Best Actress from 1936 to 2010. They found that the actresses who won such an award were 68% more likely to have their relationships end than non-winners. The Best Supporting Actress, Angelina Jolie, had taken home her Oscar, only to end her relationship with her husband, Billy Bob Thornton, not long after. Next in line was Halle Berry, who was victorious in 2002. Shortly after her win, Eric Benet and her split up amid infidelity allegations. Reese Witherspoon and Ryan Philippe were having troubles in 2006, the same year that Witherspoon had won the award, and in 2007 they confirmed their divorce. Shortly after Sandra Bullock's 2009 Oscar win, she split with Jesse James after a cheating scandal, sending shockwaves through the community. 1 year after Kate Winslet was given the 2009 Best Actress Oscar, she and Sam Mendes would terminate their marriage. The same occurred between Helen Hunt and Hank Azaria, and the list only goes on. While initially it was believed that the curse affects mainly actresses, another study revealed that male winners had a likelihood of divorce 3 times more than actresses did in their first year of marriage. Male nominees were twice as likely to have their relationships terminated than non-nominated actors. Sean Penn and Robin Wright had been married for 14 years right up until 2009, when Sean won Best Actor. Leonardo DiCaprio had waited quite some time for his Oscar, and when he finally got it, his relationship with model Kelly Rohrbach quickly declined. According to research, while the Oscar love curse affects most actors, the actress victims, who are married to male actors, are beginning to catch up. No one is certain as to why they're being subjected to this curse, but a few guesses have been made. One of them puts the conclusion down to women having a higher status than their male partners, referring primarily to actresses who are married, engaged, or in a relationship with actors. Still, of course, this is just one theory. Number 9. When Paula Blanchard got into a dispute with her mother, she discovered that the man who raised her was not her biological father, and the 4 boys that she understood to be her half-brothers were not even related to her at all. This newfound knowledge would be only curiosity about her origins. The identity of her biological father became a prominent question for quite some time. Her mother would tell her that the man that she was looking for was from Vancouver, but this had been a false lead. Even though the trail had gone cold, Paula still had her longtime best friend by her side, Heather Barker. Her search for the truth only grew over the years, and in 2019, she turned to a DNA testing service called 23andMe. This allows clients to learn the risks of genetic conditions, find their origins, and even connect with long-lost relatives. Even with this helpful tool and potential relative connections, the road ahead would be a long one. With these tests, there may be thousands of results for possible connections, so one would need to look for a certain percentage of DNA that shows a close relation. Paula managed to find a cousin, and the two began exchanging messages. But one day, the woman just disappeared. More than a year later, she popped up again and said that her mother, Tanya, may be able to help her. Through her, she learned of a new side of the family living in BC's Capitol Hill, and soon she gathered more information on names, ages, and locations of possible relatives. In 2021, the DNA focus would land on 4 brothers: cousins of Tanya's father. Two of them were too young to fit into the timeline, and only Jack and Rick Barker left. Paula had been discussing her task with her family as well, and when her uncle heard the name, he recognized it. Barker had been a man that her grandmother had chased off decades before when the mother had been pregnant. Unfortunately, by this time, both Jack and Rick had passed away, but she was still happy to have found just some familiarity. It was while she was tying up some loose ends that Paula found Ricky Barker's obituary. There was mention of a son named Keith and a daughter named Heather, the same Heather Barker that had been the woman's best friend for 20 years. The decades-old friends were half-sisters, which was confirmed through further genetic testing. Paula was shocked and exclaimed to her uncle that Heather was her best friend and she would go on vacation with her family all the time, and that they would do absolutely everything together. The newfound sisters had various similarities as well. They both loved playing music and had picked the same name for one of their children. That name was Taylor, which should be used as both a boy and a girl name. Paula had also instinctively taken on the role of being a big sister during their friendship, and would even pass along some hand-me-downs. In the end, the two would join forces to look for long-lost cousins and more family members. For decades, Paula had searched for her biological family, not knowing that one of them had been right beside her for the past 20 years. Number 8. It was a Wednesday, the 1st of March in 1950, and the church choir was scheduled for practice at 7:20 p.m. at the Westside Baptist Church in Nebraska. The members generally gather at the church at 7:15 p.m. Unfortunately, havoc drew in at 7:25 when a gas leak led to an explosion, demolishing the church and even destroying nearby windows of a building. The blast was so immense that it had taken a radio station right off the air. No one could have survived such an explosion, except they did. Each of the choir members was running later for their own different and random reasons. Reverend Walter Klempel, the minister, his wife, and his daughter were ready to leave on time, but the daughter suddenly noticed that she had a stain on her dress. So her mother took out a new one and began ironing it. This delayed the family, and they were still at home during the explosion. Marilyn Paul, the pianist, was going to arrive at the church half an hour early, but decided to take a nap after dinner and overslept. Her mother, who's also the choir director, had tried waking her repeatedly, but she only managed to at around 7:15. The mother decided to wait for Marilyn to be ready so that they could leave together, and then they heard the incredible blast. Lucille Jones and Dorothy Wood would often arrive at practice together, but that evening Lucille was distracted by a radio program and opted to wait until 7:30, breaking her habit of promptness, and Dorothy patiently waited for her. Rihanna and Sadie Estes, two sisters, had actually been ready early, but were stopped in their tracks when the car wouldn't start. They got hold of a friend named LaDonna Vandergrift for a ride. She was usually very early for practice, but this time, she'd been kept behind to finish up a highly complex geometry problem. This made all three of them late. Another man named Herbert Kiff was running ahead of time but needed to finish an essential letter. At 7:25, he was still at his office desk. Mrs. Schuster had left with her daughter Susan, but before heading to the church, she had to stop to help her mother, who needed to go for a missionary meeting. Harvey All, a machinist, was held back while trying to get his two sons ready for practice. His wife had been away that evening, so she couldn't help, which delayed all three of them. The stenographer, Joyce Black, was next in line. She lived right across the street from the church, but her reason for being late was plain laziness. It was cold that evening, and she was huddled in the warm house. She didn't feel like stepping a foot outside until the absolute last moment. Luckily, the church was empty when it exploded, and a roar was heard all over town. The building was in smithereens, the roof had caved in, and the walls had burst outward, but not a single person was harmed. The whole choir was late, which is not something that had happened before, and each for their own unique reasons. Was it an act of divine intervention that saved the 15 members, or was it synchronicity? Whatever it was indeed a strange and lucky coincidence that spared the lives of many. Number 7. The superstition revolving around Friday the 13th goes far back in history. The first mention of it in English took place in Henry Sutherland Edwards' biography of Gioacchino Rossini in 1868. Rossini had passed away on the 13th of November, a Friday. Then came the 1907 publication of Thomas William Lawson's novel called Friday the 13th. The book focuses on this unlucky day, but it's a tale that focuses more on the dishonesty regarding this day. In the book, a stockbroker had taken advantage of superstition to create panic and bring Wall Street to its knees. Thomas was born in 1857 and was an American businessman and author. He was well known for his efforts to promote reforms in the stock market, and the fortune that he acquired had been through stock manipulations. Coincidentally, a large sailing ship called Thomas W. Lawson, apparently named after a different man, was launched in 1902. The vessel was said to be the largest sailing ship at the time, and was operated by a crew consisting of 18 men. Initially, the Lawson was used to work coal routes, but at the start of the 20th century, the demand for oil increased. The vessel was sold to an Anglo-American oil company and converted into an oil tanker. Having the same name as the author wasn't the only coincidence involving the ship. On the 19th of November, 1907, the ship was off to London on its first ever transatlantic crossing. During this trip, the Lawson would encounter various gales, destroying most of the lifeboats and the sails. Even though it was severely damaged, the ship was able to reach the Celtic Sea. The captain was confident that the ship would survive the storm, so he refused any help from the ship nearby. He hoisted no distress signals and did not consider himself or the crew to be in danger. The next night, winds blew at 90 miles per hour, snapping the anchor chain. Ultimately, the ship began to sink, with only 2 crew members surviving. The date was the 13th of December, a Friday. 2 days prior, the author Thomas Lawson's book, Friday the 13th, was published. Not only did the ship have the same name as the author, but it had also sunk on the day of the book's title, an eerie coincidence. Number 6. There exists a strange phenomenon that is of mere coincidence, but has captured the attention of many. Some believe that various celebrities are immortal. There are many celebrities that have an uncanny resemblance to historical figures. Photographs and historical paintings are being compared by many sharp-eyed individuals who are able to capture these incredible similarities. While it is just a funny coincidence, it does raise a few exciting questions. Like, is Jack Black a secret time traveler? Or is Nicolas Cage a vampire or other immortal being? The list of celebrities that look like historical people starts with Nicolas. People do think he's a vampire, an idea that began in 2011. A man from Seattle was trying to sell a picture of Lieutenant Robert M. Smith, a Confederate prisoner of war, who has a striking resemblance to the actor. The picture was being sold on eBay under the title Nicolas Cage is a Vampire. Shortly after the listing was made, it disappeared mysteriously, but according to theorists, he's been dropping hints about his immortality, starting with his 1988 movie, Vampire's Kiss. The actor would go on to appear on a talk show and deny that he's a vampire, but Snopes, the fact-checking site, rates the claim as undetermined. But Nicholas seems to be at war with John Travolta, another centuries-old man. A 150-year-old photo of an unidentified man appears to resemble this actor as well. Perhaps this was an act of reincarnation or yet another strange coincidence. A painting of the 19th century actor Paul Monet takes the same appearance as Keanu Reeves, who hasn't changed much since his late 20s. Some have suggested that Jack Black was around during the time of the Revolutionary War. John Singleton Copley painted Jack Black back in 1768 as a silversmith in Boston. Jack also has an interest in metals. One of his hobbies is to collect old coins. One of the more alarming coincidences is a particular picture and a particular painting. The painting, which was done between 1518 and 1520, was a self-portrait by an Italian Renaissance artist. The painting has been compared to a specific picture of Oscar Isaac, and the resemblance is scary. Is Leon Trotsky Andrew Garfield from the past? It just appears to be another coincidence, since Garfield's ancestry is not traced back to Russia. One that has gone unnoticed for some time was that Brad Pitt looked a lot like Herman Rorschach, the man who made the Rorschach ink blots. Some sharp-eyed people were also able to find Bruce Willis's doppelganger, Douglas MacArthur, the five-star general who'd left the US and allies into the Second World War. Right down to the eyebrows, Conan O'Brien looks just like Marshall Harvey Twitchell, who was a Union soldier during the American Civil War. It gets even stranger when Peter Dinklage enters the list. A 1645 painting done by Diego Velázquez depicts a person of short stature with the same facial structure and the same beard and mustache as the Game of Thrones actor. Orlando Bloom doesn't evade the list either. He resembles a soldier from the 1800s named Nicolae Grigorescu, who was an influential Romanian painter. Oddly, Bloom is an enthusiastic artwork collector. A Scottish painter from 200 years ago, David Wilkie, had the same fierce red hair as Rupert Grint. The painter was 20 years old in this self-portrait and shared a strange resemblance to Rupert, Harry Potter's Ron Weasley. Many more celebrities have been added to the list, making it a rather odd coincidental phenomenon. Are these people immortal? Were they the result of reincarnation, or is it just mere coincidence that's caused these similarities? Number 5. When Amy Kavisha was young, she was visiting her grandmother near the Black Sea. They were watching her favorite show, Georgia's Got Talent. One of the contestants on the show closely resembled Amy to the point that they looked identical. Everyone was calling out for her mother, asking why she was dancing on a show under a different name. The name was Ano Sartanya. The family brushed it off as a mere coincidence, along with the reason that everyone had a doppelganger. 7 years down the line, in November of 2021, Amy, who was now 19, had posted a video of herself with blue hair getting an eyebrow piercing on TikTok. 320 kilometers away in Tbilisi, another 19-year-old was sent the same video by a friend who thought it was strange that the two looked similar. It was Ano Sartanya, the girl from Georgia's Got Talent. She tried to track the woman down from the video but was unsuccessful. So she shared the video on a WhatsApp group for a university, hoping someone might recognize her. A friend of Amy's did and helped them connect through Facebook. This incredible digital encounter set the scene for uncovering a past that had been shrouded in secrecy for the past 19 years. The two women spoke at length and discovered a variety of similarities, but not all of them made a lot of sense. The two had been born in a Western Georgia hospital that no longer exists. According to the birth certificate, the two births were a few weeks apart from one another, ruling out the idea that they were sisters. They couldn't be sisters or twins, but the similarities were in abundance. They both enjoyed the same music and shared a love for dancing. They had the same hairstyle and same genetic disease known as dysplasia. Was it just a mere coincidence that they looked the same and shared all these similarities? Amy recalled that every time she learned something new about Ano, the entire thing would just get weirder. But together, the two would attempt to unravel a mystery. Not long after they arranged to meet up, the two were nervous. Amy approached an escalator in Tbilisi, and for the first time, they would see each other in person. It felt as if they were looking into a mirror, and they even had the same voice. Together, they began digging deeper, and soon the doppelgangers would find that their official birth certificates had been wrong. After further investigation, Amy's mother, unable to bear children, revealed that a friend had told her about an unwanted baby at the local hospital. She had to pay the doctors there, but would be allowed to take Amy home and raise her as her own. Strangely enough, Ano's mother gave the same story. Amy and Ano were identical twins, separated at birth and sold to separate families. They were long-lost siblings. Neither family knew of the other daughter, and despite paying a large sum of money, they didn't realize that it was illegal. At the time, Georgia was in a state of constant turmoil, and since the exchange involved hospital staff, neither adoptive parent would question it. The two identical twins had found each other by mere coincidence, first through a TV talent show and then through a TikTok video. It appeared that fate couldn't keep these sisters away from each other. Soon, the two had tracked down their birth mother in Germany. They met with her and began to piece together the whole story. This occurrence also revealed a troubling issue in Georgia. These two sisters were among thousands of others who'd been illegally sold from the hospital, some even as recently as 2005. Number 4. In 1814, the British troops were seeking revenge against the United States, who'd burned the legislative building. private warehouses, and government structures during the Battle of York. The British wanted to teach them how it was done. A charge was led by British Mayor General Robert Ross and Admiral George Cockburn. On the 24th of August, both armies went outside of the city, but the US was easily overpowered and the charge pressed onward. This charge would burn the Capitol, the White House, the Treasury, and more government buildings in Washington, D.C. The city was at the point of ruins. If that wasn't bad enough, Cockburn had unapologetically indulged in the dinner prepared for President James Madison, who was nearly captured by the troops along with the Secretary of State, James Monroe. The next day, the British were looking for ammunition and other supplies to torch. It was that day that the decision was made by the troops to leave Washington. The decision came after an accident that occurred the previous night that took the lives of 30 soldiers. Rumors had also circulated that the Americans had amassed a militia that would be returning to confront the forces that had invaded their city. The charge quickly finished up their operation of setting the city alight. It was then that clouds appeared on the horizon, and it looked as though a violent storm was on the way. One British soldier, George Robert Gleig, detailed what unfolded in his memoirs. It was a thunderstorm that rolled over Washington, and that afternoon, he explained that the force of the wind made it impossible to form any conception. The roofs of the houses were torn off and looked like sheets of paper as they were whisked into the sky. The rain came rushing down in a mighty manner. The severe weather would persist for a lengthy 2 hours, dumping torrential rain all over, dousing the fires that burned the city. 2 of the British troops met their demise this way, and Gleig was knocked off his horse. 2 cannons had been picked up and thrown across the landscape like children's toys. Parts of the storm seemed tornado-like, uprooting trees and ripping roofs off of buildings. The violent storm not only put out the destructive fires, but it also forced the British to withdraw. Once the storm had subsided and the British departed, the President and the American forces returned to the Capitol to see the destruction. Both the Capitol and the White House were rebuilt, and books were donated to the Library of Congress to restock what had been lost. On the 1st of September of that year, Madison stated that the attack had revealed disregard for the principles of humanity and rules of warfare. He also noted that this charge was led at the same time that the British had invited Americans to begin peace talks. Historical stories and news articles headed the occurrence as the tornado that saved Washington. The storm had begun in the center of the city, doused fires, and pushed back the British troops. Its occurrence was coincidentally well-timed. Had it not been so sudden, Washington may have been left in a state of disrepair and reduced to mere ashes. 2 weeks after this, the British were trying to invade Baltimore at a similar charge, but it was unsuccessful, and the Major General met his demise at this time as well. This war marked a bizarre episode in American history. Weather historians agree that the storm had in fact been a tornado, or possibly a few that saved the city. When one of the British men had emerged from where they'd been sheltering, they asked one of the inhabitants if this had been the kind of weather they were accustomed to in the city. She responded that it certainly was not, and that it was an interposition of Providence to drive the enemy away. Number 3. On the 2nd of March this year, Mark Garland, a 58-year-old man and bus driver from Trowbridge, Wiltshire, had been checking into his flight to Bangkok, Thailand, at the Heathrow Airport. The flight was heading from London, but at Terminal 2, the staff had told him that he'd already checked in. It took 40 minutes for the staff to figure out what happened. There were 2 Mark Garlands booked for the same flight, but they were 2 different people. The coincidences didn't end there. Mark Garland met the other Mark Garland, a 62-year-old builder from Warmley, Bristol, at departures. Mark 58 and Mark 62 were incredibly similar in appearance. They both had a shaved head that looked eerily the same, with an indentation on their right side. When one of the Marks had gotten to his seat on the plane, he found that he was going to be sitting right next to the other Mark, and the 2 would spend the next 11.5 hours chatting. They figured out that they lived only 15 miles apart from one another, and sometimes one man boards the other one's bus. One would think that that's where the uncanny similarities would end, but it turned out that the pair had a mutual friend who would go for drinks with Mark 62 at one of the local pubs. Yet that friend failed to mention this strange coincidence to either of them. The two men are both single and both have 4 children. Both of them shared a love for Thailand and have visited the place more than a dozen times. The two had been so shocked by how strange the whole ordeal was that neither of them could stop laughing and smiling. Mark, 58, had told the other that he could have caused him so many problems. Neither of the men had ever seen anything like this before. Initially, he thought someone was winding him up when he heard his name coming from the antenna, asking him to come to the desk. When he got there, there was a man who looked just like him. It was also realized that both of them were going on holiday to Thailand for almost the same amount of time. This strange twist of fate led the two very similar men to sit right next to each other, sparking an instant connection. Various news outlets also began to report on this strange occurrence. Headlines read anything from "Man finds doppelganger next to him on plane" to "British doppelgangers sit next to each other on the flight," "Discover they're both called Mark Garland, have 4 kids and a mutual pal." By the end of the flight, the two Marks had formed a solid friendship. They promised to stay in contact and may even meet up for a drink during their holiday. Number 2. In the early 1970s, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Brian Jones had passed away within 2 years of one another. The correlation, they were all 27 years old. This gave birth to the idea of the 27 Club, a coincidence where popular musicians appeared to be passing away at the same age. It became more noticeable after the passing of Kurt Cobain in 1994 at the age of 27. It only brought on more attention in 2011 when 27-year-old Amy Winehouse also met her demise. While the idea was initially connected to musicians, this would expand to exclude young artists and actors who've lost their lives at the same age due to freak accidents or health complications. The members of the coincidental club starts with Robert Johnson, a celebrated Delta blues musician. He rose to fame while performing alongside Howlin' Wolf, Elmore James, and Memphis Slim until August of 1938. It was just a few months after his 27th birthday that Johnson had consumed a bottle of whiskey that he was given. After this, he would pass away from pneumonia and strychnine poisoning. Brian Jones, the founder of the Rolling Stones, passed away in 1969 from an unknown cause. His untimely passing is a persistent rock and roll mystery, and he was 27 years old. Alan Wilson, a guitarist who made an appearance at Woodstock in 1969, enjoyed sleeping outdoors. He was found deceased on the 3rd of September in 1970 in Bob Haidt, the vocalist's yard. It was believed that he'd accidentally overdosed on a sleeping tablet, the same kind of sleeping tablet that drove Jimi Hendrix to his grave in 1970. Janis Joplin, the 27-year-old singer, had also been found deceased in her hotel room in 1970. Jim Morrison's passing was said to be an act of fate, and what makes it weirder is that his girlfriend at the time had also passed away at the exact same age. Not only was Jim added to the 27 Club, but his girlfriend was as well. By Ronald McKernan's mid-20s, he was suffering from cirrhosis of the liver, among other health conditions, before succumbing to them in 1973. Yet again, at the same age, David Alexander had developed pancreatitis, and his lungs were filling with fluid. He would then suffer pulmonary edema in February of 1975. Pete Ham, Chris Bell, Mia Zapata, Kurt Cobain, Kristen Pfaff, Randy Walker, Jeremy Michael Ward, Jonathan Brandis, and Anton Yelchin are just a few members who make up the 27 Club. The correlations were so well noticed that a whole book about it was written by Howard Soons. Strangely though, a statistical analysis was carried out and found that the most common age of passing away musicians was not 27, but rather 56. Musicians who passed away at the age of 27 between 1950 and 2010 were just 1.3%, whereas those aged 56 were 2.3%. So perhaps it should be the 56 Club. But she did find another coincidence. Through her analysis, she found that the younger musicians who were passing on were from newer genres of music like hip-hop, punk, and rap. Most of the 27-year-olds were in one of these categories of music. Kinney wrote in the report that the music genre is associated with distance morality causes, which correlate more with gender than with age. So we may not be able to entirely blame the 27th year for the mortality rate, but the coincidences didn't go unnoticed by the community. And perhaps something stranger and connected is at play here. Number 1. Julia Tonetti was born in the Dominican Republic in December of 1989 and would be adopted the following year and taken to Connecticut, where she would spend most of her life. When she reached college, her former babysitter suggested that she work for her husband, a manager of a local bar and restaurant. She began working there in 2011, and in 2013, Cassandra Madison was hired. The two were both in the restaurant area known as the Russian Lady, and one day, Julia took note of a Dominican Republic flag tattoo on Cassandra's arm. She also had the same tattoo on her bag. The two were both from the same place, which sparked a quick friendship. They hung out every weekend, either going shopping or to brunch. Cassandra was born in 1988, a year older than Julia, and had also been adopted. One day, the two suspected that they might be related and pulled up their adoption paperwork, but the information didn't line up. The paperwork showed that they were born in different cities. Their biological last names weren't the same, and neither were their mother's biological names. Julia and Cassandra left it at that, because what are the odds of two adopted women working in a Connecticut bar being biological sisters? In 2015, Cassandra moved to Virginia with her husband, and the two friends stayed in touch on social media but weren't as close as they were before. A few years later, the adopted woman wanted to learn more about her background and took a 23andMe DNA test in 2015. Through that, she was able to connect with a cousin from Connecticut whose mother gave her some information. Through that information, Cassandra found her biological father. In 2019, she headed to the Dominican Republic to meet her family. Julia would then find out that her childhood friend, Molly, was adopted as well, and had also been researching her paperwork. This revealed that Cassandra's and Molly's mothers had the same last name. A DNA test revealed that the two were third cousins. Molly's paperwork made it seem as though she was her friend's sister, and this made her wonder if their adoption paperwork had gotten mixed up. At the time, Julia was content with her family, and finding her biological one was not something she was considering. That was until 2020, when Cassandra asked her biological father if her mother had given up more children. She had, and it was another baby girl who was born in 1989. It was on New Year's Day of 2021 when the woman drove 8 hours back to Connecticut to deliver a DNA test to Julia, who was hesitant because if they weren't sisters, it might have been a letdown, but she did it anyway. The process takes a few months, but an app is able to track some progress. Cassandra was phoning Julia every other day for an update. On the 28th of January, 2021, at 11:45, there was an alert on her phone. The results were in. She was nervous, and when she looked at the results under DNA relatives, Cassandra Madison was listed there. It was an incredible revelation for the two best friends. Julia then connected with her biological father as well, and he was over the moon. The two girls were put up for adoption because their older brother was extremely sick and needed much attention and medical help. The parents were unable to support both of the girls. It was an incredible coincidence that Julia was biologically related to two of her best friends as well. Molly was also her third cousin and childhood friend. She and Cassandra had also been friends for a few years, not knowing but suspecting that they were sisters. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.